Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and let's round out the trilogy with my late review of Dead Space 3. I played it on the Xbox Series X via backwards compatibility. It's also available on the Xbox One, Xbox 360, PS3, and PC. Let's start with the story like we always do. Once again, you are playing as Isaac Clarke, unless you are doing this co-op, and then the second player is playing as Carver. And co-op is something that was shoved into this game, and I'll tell you right now, it feels it at times. But let's go beyond that. You are not so, subtly recruited into a mission to basically finish off the whole necromorph thing once and for all. Everything has devolved in the world. You've got the government fighting the unitologists in a full-out war, and the unitologists are winning. The military group that you are basically pulled into found out that there is a way to end this through a contact of theirs. Their contact turns out to be Ellie from the last game, and, it goes kind of like you'd expect it to from there. And that is one thing I will say about this game. I think it was a little too predictable and a little boring, and some of the more interesting ideas were cut out of it. Plus, some of the writing in this game is so bad. Not necessarily the events, but like the dialogue, just the conversations back and forth. Some of it is so terrible, and it just doesn't fit, and it just doesn't work. But let's go beyond that into the audio, and the music in this game is really good. I've always thought the Dead Space games had good music, and I think that the sound effects are really good as well. They definitely fit with what's going on. They fit in the world. You're on an ice planet, and it sounds like it would be cold. The voiceover work is, for the most part, very well done. There's a couple of characters who could be better. And it doesn't help that, like I pointed out, some of the scripting is not great. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and as I already stated, this is co-op, but it is a third-person action game. I'm not even going to slap horror on there because, EA really pushed Visceral away from the horror element of this game, and it shows painfully. I will say, however, in the Awakened DLC, which I should say is actually pretty good, story-wise, it is kind of what you'd expect it to be once you start it, but we're not doing that right now. I will say, though, from a gameplay standpoint, that is better than Dead Space 3 because Visceral got to do more of what they wanted to do. So with the main game, though, it is, like I said, a third-person action game. There's not a lot of horror, and some of the flaws really show, and you can see the studio, or I guess publisher, meddling because they wanted a more war-oriented game, and it needed to be co-op, and man, the co-op feels shoehorned in, and this game just doesn't function as well as it could when you are fighting other people. Like, when you're fighting unitologists, it just doesn't really feel as good as it could. Especially the further you get in the game, because you go through these long spells of not fighting unitologists and you're just fighting necromorphs. So you have your weapons based around fighting necromorphs, and then you fight unitologists, and it just doesn't work as well. But as you notice, I didn't say horror because there's really not a lot of scary stuff going on in this game, unfortunately. There are some interesting things that feel completely unnecessary, like your ability to collect resources and, really customize guns, and you can build really unique guns. But quite frankly, I didn't feel like it was necessary or added too much. It just felt like that was a popular mechanic at the time, just like the co-op was, and so EA said, hey, this needs to be in the game. Now, going into the Awakening DLC, one of the cool things they did was they brought a bit of that horror back because, man, the main game really abandoned the psychological horror that Dead Space was known for. And one of the cool things was when you were playing co-op, and it was something they wanted in the main game, but they were able to put into the DLC, you and Carver will have different hallucinations. So if you're doing it co-op, you may be seeing something and your buddy isn't. So I always thought that was a cool element, and that was something that, the main game would have really benefited from. But otherwise, the DLC really only adds that, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's not enough to really save the gameplay. Now let's get into the controls, and the controls are what you have experienced in the previous games. They really actually still work very well. Issues that I ran into were less of a controls issue and more of a mechanics issue. Because to put it simply, Visceral wasn't trying to make an action shooter, and that's what they're forced to make. And the controls that they had and they knew and that worked in Dead Space were put into this game, and they didn't always mesh with the mechanics. Lastly, the visuals. I'm gonna say I like the world design. I mean, it's a snow planet, but it works well enough. It's not there that the game shines. It's definitely in some of the space areas as well as the final area in the game. I thought that looked really cool. I liked the environment there. But I mean, like I said, it's a snow planet. It's not that interesting. That was kind of disappointing. It was fine. A lot of the creature design, however, I did enjoy. I mean, obviously the necromorphs are something we're used to at this point. They do look a little different. They look like, you know, people from different eras. That was well done, I think. As well as you are on an alien planet, so there are some alien necromorphs, and that looks pretty cool. As for, you know, the unitologist enemies, they looked fine. They looked, you know, they looked like guys in the kind of suits that Isaac would be wearing. Which I'm going to say, that was one thing that was disappointing in previous games. As you would upgrade your suit, you could see the new armor being attached to it. You could see that stuff. And it seems like they got rid of that from this game, or at least I couldn't tell the difference after upgrading one suit, you know? I was really disappointed that I would upgrade my suit. I had my suit maxed out, and it really didn't look any different, you know, from start to finish. And beyond that, the faces look a little weird. It was like they were trying to put more facial expression into them, and it ended up looking cartoony. And it definitely felt like it stripped back some of the drama by them doing that. And when I say cartoony, I don't mean like cartoony graphics that ages well. I mean cartoony in that they were trying to be hyper-realistic, and it went cartoony and doesn't age that well. So yeah, unfortunately the visuals are a bit of a letdown. So to wrap this up, the DLC is probably the best part of Dead Space 3, and that's sad. Dead Space 3 had the potential to round out a really awesome trilogy, but EA getting in there and doing their EA bullshit really dragged the entire game down. Not to say that it is unplayable, but if you loved Dead Space 1 and Dead Space 2, it's best to leave it there. So I'm gonna say, yeah, feel free to skip Dead Space 3. It's not the wondrous ending to the trilogy that we deserve. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me what is your favorite sci-fi horror book? Let's go there. And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.